Hello, and welcome to episode 321 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast in all of the internet. My name is Jordan Willis.
My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest joining for today's episode of the podcast. From Polygon Treehouse, we have the wonderful Alex Kanaris-Sotiriou. How you doing, Alex?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, joining you from not so sunny Dundee in Scotland.
Very good.
Alex, thanks again for joining us. Alex is here to talk about how multi-platform games are made. He has helped make several, so we got someone who knows a lot more than us to kind of break it down for us. But before we get to that, of course, we got all the news. Kirby and the Forgotten Land Nintendo Switch 2 edition plus Star-Crossed World released with an extra DLC pack. CD Projekt Red reveals that 75% of the Cyberpunk sales were physical, which is kind of interesting. We'll get into that. And then randomly, Atari acquires rights for 5 IP from Ubisoft for we don't know why. Let's talk about that. But anyway, before we get into all that, how's everyone doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I had a nice weekend. David had a cinema weekend. I saw 5 movies in theaters this weekend. You could say I saw a lot of the new releases here in Austin. I saw Toxic Avenger, Caught Stealing, the new Aronofsky movie, which I loved. I loved all the movies actually. And what was the other one? Splitsville. It's kind of a wacky romance comedy. I really loved that one. And then last night at the Paramount, I was able to catch a double feature of Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2. So it was a really nice weekend. I've been so busy since getting laid off at my job, and it was I've had so much administrative paperwork shit to do constantly that it was just I'm having a nice chill weekend. This is what I wanted when I lost my job in the first place. So that was a really nice time for me. But other than that, yeah, just chilling, reading a lot of books and stuff like that. But what about you, Jordan?
I do have a random question.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Splitsville and The Roses, how are those two movies different? Because they're both about couples that are having animosity, or I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, Roses is like a War of the Roses remake, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I did not see that one. That's the new release I did not catch this week, I guess. But I don't know. Splitsville was good, though. I think it's in limited release right now.
Okay.
And then it's coming out nationwide later. But
I was just looking at movies and I was like, are these different movies? Anyway,
I think so. Splitsville's good, though. Check it out. It was I think it premiered at Cannes, and I don't know. I just loved it. I thought it was really, really funny.
Cool. Yeah, doing pretty good here. We had a little get together on Friday, so Valerie's family came over, and that was nice, kind of visit with them. And then other than that, it's just been a pretty chill weekend. Didn't really do anything on Saturday except for I played. David, you'll be delighted to know that I played I got my first cherry in UFO 50, which I'll talk about later. And then yesterday, I kind of just hung out around the house and then met up with a friend for his birthday. And that's really about it, man. Alex, what have you been up to?
So I was visiting family all last week down in Sheffield. So after the COVID lockdowns in England, we toyed with the idea of moving to New Zealand because we wanted some mountains. Cambridge is where I lived when I was working at PlayStation for 14 years.
Right.
It's a very flat place. It's they call it Fenland. Basically, it means it's like a swamp. and so we moved to Scotland to enjoy the mountains, as a test drive to see whether we prefer Scotland to New Zealand. Scotland's much closer. So it does mean when I go and visit family who are down in Sheffield, it's about a 7-hour drive. But so I was down in Sheffield visiting family. Sheffield's the home. Film reference to Full Monty. That's from Sheffield. Sean Bean from Sheffield. Def Leppard, Pulp. I don't think Pulp made it to America, but
we're pivoting. We're just going to be talking about all the famous people that came out of Sheffield for the rest of this episode.
But also home to a lot of video games. I mean, fortunately. Gremlin Graphics was an early video game studio, and Tomb Raider, which we were chatting about pre-show, was made just down the road in Derby. But I was there just catching up with family, doing a few gentle hikes, going down the pub. So the most favourite of British pastimes, and and I've been working on some scripts. So had my laptop when I was typing away. That's one of the nice things about being a indie developer. I'm not really tied to a specific spot, so I can kind of work on various different things, and so it's been really nice to start work on some of the scripts for our third indie game now. So that's been really exciting.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to play that. I'm very excited to see what you guys have cooking up. But we'll be getting into a lot of that, your indie career and getting into multi-platform in the main topic. But before we get into all that and the news, I'd like to go through a few shout outs from our last week's episode. We did an episode with Melora Hart from History of Hyrule, and we talked all about games media preservation. That was an awesome chat. I had a really good time on that episode. A couple shout outs there from the Discord. We were talking about Sakurai's very long directs, and cool Uncle Vince said, I really like the idea of Sakurai being a filibuster ringer, which would be pretty cool if Masahiro Sakurai decides to ever get into American politics. On YouTube, we had a comment from Real Tomato saying that the zine section at Austin Public Library is top-notch. Agreed there. I love going there just to check out some zines. And then over on Blue Sky, we had a few shout outs. One of them from Omnom Berries, who said, I've known History of Hyrule for like a long time, and she was one of the first people online who supported me doing my comics. She has such a great insight into the importance of archiving and the history of Zelda art. Give it a listen. Thank you for that, Omnom Berries. And then also Pixel Zombolina said, I really enjoyed hearing your story more in depth. I've always had so much respect for all you do. Obviously speaking to Melora here. I remember you being so excited for Ocarina of Time translations back in the day, and then the actual manga was released here. You're such a big part of Zelda history, so thank you both to Pixel Zombolina and Omnom Berries for those. Yeah, it was really great, especially in that interview, talking to Melora and being like, oh, you're the reason that this campaign happened, or like, oh, you're probably part of the reason that Hyrule Historia got translated and all that stuff. So that was a really great interview. If you haven't listened to that one, definitely check it out. And then if you would like to be shouted out, listener, we would love to shout you out. So leave us a comment on this YouTube video while you're there. Give us a like and a subscribe, or reach out to us on Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, any of these places. We'd love to speak to you there. And if you could, please share the podcast with a friend, whether that be posting something on Reddit or word of mouth. Any kind of sharing really helps the show, and we would love to have your patronage over on our Discord. We'll have more information about that at the end of this episode. But I think with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the news, how we feel about that, because we have a lot to talk about. It has been a news-filled week. We're going to start first off with, as you brought up, the release of Kirby and the Forgotten Land Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Starcross Worlds DLC. Nintendo loves these long titles. I think we're getting increasingly better at reciting them in full. That released on the 28th of August here. I've been playing it a little bit, not a ton, but it has been getting pretty good reviews across the board. Kirby and the Forgotten Land got great reviews when it released, but was kind of locked to 30 FPS on the original Switch. And I know just the base game has been expanded out to 1440p and 60 frames per second, and has this whole kind of additional 12 levels or so that have come out. Have you been able to check it out, Jordan? Were you interested in this at all?
I would love to play this. I did actually really enjoy Kirby and the Forgotten Land way more than I thought I was going to. I'm not huge, usually on like super level based stuff. But I just haven't had a chance. I mean, it's like so many games are about to come out, and I'm already playing so many different games. It's like spending $20 to revisit a game that I already put a good amount of time into is an interesting proposition, but I just don't think I'll play it anytime soon, but I would like to play it eventually.
Yeah, well, I've got a digital copy if you feel like checking out my copy sometime. Me and Jordan, spoiler, are on a family plan.
I'd have to restart it, or can you just jump straight in?
You can jump straight in. Yeah. The new levels open up like on the map, right? So if you don't want to replay the game, you don't have to. I started a new save just so I could replay the game in 60 FPS, and I've been enjoying it that way. But what about you, Alex? Are you a Kirby fan?
Not really, no. It kind of passed me by. I'm a big Metroid fan, so I've got a Switch 2, and I got it for Metroid Prime 4. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. And I kind of went I had a bit of a roller coaster ride with Mario Kart World. I kind of started off and I was like, wow, this is great. And then I kind of fell out of love with it, and I came back and fell in love with it again as I was trying to get the top ranking for the 150cc elimination races, like getting first point every checkpoint. And I found that really rewarding, and I was trying to hustle and do that before Bonanza. So yeah, I've been really enjoying the Switch 2 so far. And there's so much to play. I'm not in a crazy rush for all the games to come out. I think I probably will play Silk Song on it just for the beefy performance. So I'm excited that in a few days. But yeah, it's a lovely bit of kit.
Yeah, I've been enjoying the console quite a bit, and I think that hopefully we'll be hearing something later this month in September, which we'll talk about later in the show, about some more Switch 2 editions coming to the console, because I think especially as long as they're adding kind of bits of DLC to the game, charging for the performance upgrades, that seems like a pretty fair thing to me. I'd much rather do that than get full, Switch versions like we were getting between the Wii U and the Switch, right? So I think this is a better way to do it, even though some people balk at the price of some of these upgrades sometimes. But I think this was a nice, beefy one. A couple other little bits of Kirby news here. It seems like Alarmo is getting some Kirby themes in the future. If you forgot that Nintendo has their own alarm clock. So that'll be coming soon in a free update. And also this weekend, there was a Tetris Maximus Cup replaying some of the Kirby themes. So I played a little bit of Tetris over the weekend as well. I'm a big Tetris guy. But we'll go ahead and move on to the next bit of news here, which is that PAX West happened this past weekend. That's in Seattle. And not a ton to report here. Obviously, there were a bunch of really cool indies on display. Neither Jordan or I were at PAX West, so we don't really have any hands-on impressions of those. But we did get some impressions of some upcoming AAA ports that are coming to the Switch 2, namely Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, which is coming to the Switch, and Star Wars Outlaws. I think were both played for the first time on the handheld console. Basically, the impressions that I'm seeing is that Final Fantasy VII Remake is looking incredible on the Switch 2. I think it's running at like a locked 30 FPS, but seems like it's had a lot of work put into it to actually make it run really well on the console. I do know that that game scales pretty well. It also runs really well on the Steam Deck, and originally was a PS4 game and all that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, though, it does seem that Star Wars Outlaws runs a little rough. That's the big open world Ubisoft Star Wars game. It does seem that, especially with like Cyberpunk, if the developers really put in a lot of time to work with the console, you can get really good performance out of it. But games kind of just going full cloth over from PS5 to Switch, especially when it's playing in something like Unreal Engine 5 or something like that, tend to struggle a little bit on the system. We'll talk a little bit more in the main topic about kind of porting for lower spec hardware. I'm definitely interested to hear about some of your processes on that, Alex. But any thoughts, just kind of whole cloth, about either of these ports coming to the system?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting about the open world games and maybe them struggling a bit more. Like from my memory of the Final Fantasy, the remake, even though it was really epic, like everything, all the areas were quite contained, so I can see how that would work really well. But I think that's it's looking really nice. It's definitely given me the incentive to give it another go on Switch 2. So I kind of found it quite interesting, the difference between that game and the original game. I guess in some of the tone, I weirdly, even though it was obviously much more high fidelity, I maybe felt like I had less freedom of exploration in the remake. I felt like I was a little bit more corridor bound. But that's really interesting of when people take remakes, what do they take? What do they focus on? What kind of recedes? Obviously, the real-time aspect was really, really interesting. So really.
I ended up really liking the battle system in Remake. I thought it was actually pretty cool. We'll have to see if and when they bring Rebirth over, how that fares, because that's obviously a much bigger, more expansive thing. But you have any thoughts on either of these games, Jordan?
I'm just kind of curious, like, how much of this is them not wanting to put more resources into optimization, or do they just not have dev kits to really base this off of? And like, maybe that's making it more difficult to optimize, specifically with larger open world games. Because as we've seen, like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are huge, massive open world games with pretty minimal loading times, or like well hidden loading times. Like probably Star Wars Outlaws, I think we talked about this before, where like when you go to space, that's probably like a hidden loading time.
Yeah, it's got like the cloud layer that you kind of load through. Yeah.
And like Zelda has the same thing when you're dropping into the depths and you're like going into the hole, but I just like, I'm kind of curious, like how much of this is just an issue of the dev kits not making their ways, as we've heard rumored, whether it's true or not.
Well, I do know that Star Wars Outlaws comes out really soon. I think it's here in September. So I doubt that they'll have too much more time to optimize, although we are in the era of release a game and fix it later. So maybe there's hope yet for the AAA space on Nintendo Switch 2. But yeah, I imagine we're in the early days of these ports and we'll be seeing a lot cleaner performance going forward. Speaking of really clean performance, we're going to move on to CD Projekt Red. They're a great studio out there in Poland, and they released Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition for the Switch 2. And they revealed some numbers about the breakdown between digital copies versus physical copies sold. Cyberpunk was one of the few big games to release in the first month of the Switch that actually had the entire game on cart. They were very proud of that, and I think that it ended up doing really well for them as far as sales were concerned, because it seems like 75% of the people that bought the game physically. So I'm not sure how much of that is just the hype of a new system and wanting to have some physical games for your shelf or whatever. But it does seem that a lot of those game key cards that are releasing for the Switch are doing a lot worse sales-wise, and then you see a lot more digital sales on that front. So this is definitely something interesting to keep an eye on. There's been a lot of debate about game key cards this generation. I think you had in here also Japan's National Diet Library, which is a organization in Japan that kind of does preservation of video games. They're not accepting game key cards for preservation, right? So I think that there has been a lot of pushback in Japan specifically with this practice, and we're seeing it also globally. I think there's another game as well that we know is now confirmed to be coming all on cart, and that's Yuka Replayly from Platonic Games, which I'm actually really excited for. I've heard that the remake of that game coming out fixes a lot of the problems that people had with the original game. But Jordan, what are your thoughts on kind of the game keycard thing? And do you think that people will see the success of Cyberpunk on the Switch and try to emulate that?
No. Because it's like, it's about the bottom line, and they're like, the game key cards just cost much less. So like, yeah, even if we don't sell as many copies, they might still run the numbers and say we'll still make more money than if we put the full game on the cart and have to eat the extra cost. So but I do think it's like interesting to finally have some data to back this up, because this felt true in my heart, but in my brain, I was like, I don't see the numbers. Like, I need the numbers to see. But because, the internet's a messy place where the loudest minority kind of pushes through all the fog to where you only hear that. And you're like, okay, but like, is this how the real world is? And so seeing some like actual data. So shout out CD Projekt Red for coming out and talking about that is very nice.
Yeah, I do enjoy how transparent they have been throughout the years. But Alex, well, have you? I know you generally these days, obviously you're working on indie releases, and a lot of that is done digitally. Have you put out physical copies of either of those games?
Yeah, so we had a physical copy of Röki, our first game, with Super Rare Games. So I think it was like a limited release of like 4,000 or 5,000 copies. I probably got it over on the shelf somewhere, but yes, that was really awesome, and they were really kind of a nice instruction booklet and all that thing. I think some Switch games, as you can see, I'm quite a physical collector myself, and so I think I like some of the companies that go the extra mile and do like manuals and all that kind of stuff, rather than sometimes you get a Switch game and it's just the tiny little the card, and there's no sometimes not even any artwork on the inside of the sleeve, and it's a bit like, okay, feels a bit, they could have gone the extra mile. So I think it's really encouraging for the CD Cyberpunk game. I think probably there's a number of factors. I think one is the game's been out for a while and it's settled, right? So they've done all the kind of patching and DLCs and all that kind of stuff. So I think people probably can buy it with confidence, knowing that everything is there.
That's a good point.
And I'm guessing whether other studios will follow suit on the data, right? If they find they're selling like 100 times more copies because they have it on a card, then that's obviously maybe will allow other people to follow suit. And I really hope they do. I think for me, it's it feels. I think the key cards for me are still an improvement on code in the box. Where it's just like a single-use code on a bit of paper.
Right.
That's just like useless. For me. So I think having something where you can still, if you don't like it, you can still trade it in. that kind of thing. I think that's still an improvement on the code in the box stuff. But yeah, it feels like it's a bit, I won't say murky, but just like, is it this? You don't want to buy something and mistake. And I know and also all the kind of blurb they have to put on the boxes is just from an art director point of view is like painful. Like seal those.
I hate
like,
seeing that. Yeah.
So I mean, it would be really nice if they kind of did that stuff in a reversible sleeves. So actually, you could have the thing in the shop that's got all that information on. You have to have for legal reasons or whatever, and then you can take it home and return it around. And you have a nice clean version without all that legal gumph on it. So
yeah,
but yeah, really, really encouraging, and I hope more games will follow suit, and that we'll be able to do more physical versions of our games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Nintendo's kind of put themselves in a bit of a corner here, especially with the Switch 2 not being compatible with like standard SD cards. You know, they made the base, you know, storage space on the Switch 2 considerably bigger this generation, but also games are like 90 gigabytes, you know? So it's like, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, it's better for these downloadable games, but it's like everybody's holding off on buying those micro SD Express cards because they're just so expensive. So I don't know. We'll have to see. I imagine in a couple years, this will be a bit of a non-issue once those memory card prices come down a little bit. You know, I personally am an all-digital guy, and I've just been doing this juggling act of installing and uninstalling games constantly on my Switch 2 as I want to try out new stuff. But we'll have to see how it goes. And yeah, I do hope that for the physical collectors, we see more of that as well. But we'll move on to the next bit of news here, which involves Atari. Atari's been on kind of a kick recently. They've been doing really well, reviving a lot of older franchises. They have recently kind of pulled an Embracer Group, I'd say, and bought a bunch of IPs from Ubisoft. Jordan, do you kind of have any insight on some of these IPs that have been bought by Atari? I mean, a lot of these are a little bit more on the underground side, I would say.
Yeah, I remember Cold Fear and I Am Alive being kind of like more survival type games. Oh, so the 5 ones that they bought. Sorry, I should say that first.
Yeah, sure.
Cold Fear from 2005, I Am Alive from 2012, Child of Eden from 2011, Grow Home from 2015, and Grow Up from 2016. So honestly, like feels pretty random acquisitions. Like I'm not really sure what that means. I know Cold Fear and I Am Alive are more like survival type games. Child of Eden, is that the one that's like made by the Rez dude or something like that?
I'm not sure, but it certainly looks like it. I've got the trailer going on our on the video version right now. And this is a game that did pass me by in the past, but I'm looking at it now. And if they re-release this game in HD, I'll definitely play it.
Yeah, and so it's just like a really interesting like pickup of games, and it's like, is Atari planning to make games, or like what are they trying to do with this? Is Atari back? Like very strange, weird news that I was not expecting, but I know Ubisoft is having their own struggles, and they're probably just trying to jettison anything that they can get. So maybe Atari just saw a good opportunity to kind of pick a couple things up.
Man, that trailer is just so deliciously mid-2000s. I really loved watching that. But yeah, I mean, Atari's really been on a kick recently. You know, obviously the upcoming Bubsy 4D from Fabraz is coming out. You know, they did the System Shock 2 remaster, the Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection is coming out soon, Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic, and then kind of their old IPs from Atari. They've been doing the sort of Konami thing where they're giving it out to smaller developers, you know. So we had the iRobot, Breakout Beyond from Choice Provisions, the guys who did the, you know, Bit Trip games. Yars Rising was apparently a very, very good game as well. I didn't have a chance to play that one yet. So Atari is definitely back. I just think they're kind of more on the publishing end, right? And so I imagine that with some of these games, either they have them now so they can put out remasters, or they'll put new teams on you know, kind of legacy sequels for some of these, or spiritual successors. But either way, it's pretty nice to see. I'm pretty happy for these. We'll go ahead and move on, just for the sake of time, to our next bit of news here, and that's about Switch 2 sales. Our good friend Matt Piscatella put out a new report through Circana about the new Switch 2 sales, and it is doing really well. So far, I think Switch 2 has outperformed all of the other game console sales for the entire year, and it's only been out 2 months. Wow. Right. So that's wild. And we can get to some of what that means here in a second, but it's also outpacing Switch 1 sales by 75% right now. Now, this is all good news, I think, especially this is really good sounding news for Nintendo shareholders, which is probably what they're trying to, do, I think, with this massive amounts of units that they've been able to ship so far. But as we've kind of talked about in the past, Nintendo is selling this much because they actually made this much. I think in previous console iterations, not just Nintendo, but throughout all of the different consoles, generally when there's a new system, they sell out because, they don't make millions and millions and millions of units like Nintendo did. I think a lot of that was probably in preparation for the tariffs here in the US, trying to get ahead of some of that. What do you think about this, Alex? Does this make you excited to want to develop for Switch 2?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Switch 1 has become a really awesome home for indie games, for them releasing physically and, just for people experiencing them, especially people who are making games that have more that kind of adventure for all, everyone can play it. That kind of Nintendo has where many people play video games, it's got a really strong emotion attached to it. So there's always a special feeling about having one of your own games on Nintendo console. To have another opportunity for that is really, really great. And I think they've been really smart. And I know some people had some mixed emotions about Switch 2 and did it feel like that much of a departure? Did it feel like it was really innovating? And there was some feelings about that. But the fact they've been able to obviously make a lot of it, get it to people. And it's a really nice surprise that we're seeing those numbers. I think there's maybe a perception that because it didn't have a really packed launch lineup of first party Nintendo titles, that people say, oh, people have stopped talking about it already. Well, actually, I think it shows that maybe just the people are just playing it who aren't really vocal about it, and they're just enjoying it, and people are hoovering it up. I think Donkey Kong Bonanza was a really amazing follow-up game. So I think that coming a little bit afterwards, I think was actually quite smart and allowed that some space to breathe and to find its audience too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're definitely looking at some Game of the Year talk at the upcoming Game Awards this year for Donkey Kong Bonanza as well. At least it's certainly going to be nominated. Jordan, what do you think about kind of the long-term sales for Switch 2? Do you think it's a little too early to start talking about that? Or do you think that this big start for Nintendo, do you think that's an indicator of long-term sales?
First, I want to say, Matt Piscatella, thank you for all your work. We would love to have you on the pod.
Absolutely.
If you're listening, if anyone knows how to get a hold of Matt Piscatella, hit us on the Discord. But no, I don't think it's an indicator of long-term sales at this point, just because what you were saying is there is just a lot of units available, more so than the Switch 1. I just remember whenever I was when I was trying to get a Switch 1, it was very difficult. And it was there was a moment I saw it in a Target and it was there was 3 left. And I said, I'm just buying it right now because, and this was in September. So 3 or 4 months after it had come out. Whereas my experience of getting the Switch 2 is if you were in line 2 hours before they open the doors on the opening night, you could get one. And that is just a completely different experience than I've ever had at any console launch. I think when I went to get a Wii, it was they had 30 at the Walmart versus at this Best Buy, they had over 100 consoles. So I think it's just a little bit of that. I think the dust is going to have to settle, but I think it does show that anyone who says, oh, it's too expensive or, oh, it's not worth the money. It's the market does not agree with you, and that's okay. You can have that opinion. Personally, I think it was a pretty fair price. And it's kind of interesting to pair with, I was reading a rumor about how the PlayStation 6 might have a hybrid SKU in addition to the... Can't
believe we're already talking about PS6.
I know. Well, it's already been 5 years.
I know. It's crazy.
So it's but that's the rumor right now is they might have an additional SKU that is more of a hybrid console in addition to a digital console. I'm not convinced that there's going to be a disc-based PS6, but that would be the third SKU, I'd imagine, something like that. But anyway, good on them.
Interesting to see, obviously, Xbox have made a foray into the kind of handheld form factor as well. And so it's, and obviously Steam Deck as well. It's really interesting. Obviously, it's, they're able to put more power in your hands and actually allowing people with their busy lives the flexibility to play how they want. So I can definitely see why people are moving in that direction, obviously, and that have the flexibility flexibility is key, right? To be able to dock it, play it on the TV if you want, or just take it somewhere. That's really amazing. So I can definitely see why everyone else is starting to think about that side of things.
Yeah, I think Nintendo have always been trailblazers, and it's like, whatever they do, everyone eventually ends up copying. And this generation has been no different. I think that next generation is going to be the generation of the multi-platform handheld, right? Hybrid, right? And so I think we're really heading that way. I love my Steam Deck. I played Röki on my Steam Deck and really enjoyed it on there. It was very, very fun to play. And so, yeah, I'm excited for that future as somebody who loves to put something on the TV and veg out on my couch with a handheld in hand. It's a good time to be a gamer. And also, I do want to say, I was like you, Jordan. I kind of had a little bit of FOMO with the Switch, and I was worried, the Switch 1, that is, was worried I wouldn't get one. I actually ended up getting, apologies, Alex, I sniped one from Amazon UK. I was so desperate for a Switch, but I know, right? I stole it from a small British child, but that's just the kind of guy I am. We're going to go ahead and move on here to the next bit of news, and that is about a new venture Nintendo has started, or kind of a new rebranding, I guess you could say, and that is Nintendo Stars. Not a ton to say here, but essentially Nintendo Stars is a rebranding of Warp Star, which was kind of an affiliate of Nintendo and HAL that mostly worked on Kirby-based, merchandising and animated projects. So, they did the Kirby anime that came out a few years ago, and a lot of the other kind of supplemental material around Kirby. Seems the rebranding year from Warp Star to Nintendo Stars is kind of indicating that they'll be, using their services for more Nintendo products that are just past Kirby. So I think this is exciting. Obviously, as somebody who works in animation and on TV, I'm really excited about the prospect of more Nintendo IP being able to be made into, adapted forms other than just big screen movies. Obviously we have the upcoming Legend of Zelda movie, and we have the sequel to the Super Mario Brothers movie that are both coming. But it seems like Nintendo is firmly in their era now of, we're not just making games, we've got the theme park, we've got everything else, and they are really just bolstering it by some of the news here. I'd love to see another Kirby show. I'd love to see a Metroid show. Wink, wink. Nintendo, hit us up. I think we would kill a Metroid animated show. Personally, I'm a little biased. But that said, I think this is pretty much exciting. Do either of you have any thoughts on the new Nintendo Stars?
I would definitely take a remake of Captain N and the Games Master.
Hell yeah.
Actually, yeah, because that was like a weird fever dream where they kind of like, so they wrote down what the characters were, and then someone basically just invented something that was kind of like a weird interpretation of it. So I think that'd be really nice to see done again properly.
Yeah. Well, no skateboarding a la carte in the Castlevania show.
Lame.
There's still time, I suppose. Come on, Netflix, come on. But we'll go ahead and move on there. There's not too much more to talk about, but I'm excited to see what comes from that. Next up, this is something that actually was in the news last week that we cut. But obviously there is a kind of big push for this My Mario thing in Japan right now. And that has kind of turned into a new game that has come out for the Switch and Android, and that is called Hello Mario. It is a game definitely for babies. This is something that is like, I think, a touchscreen only game where you can kind of like manipulate Mario's face in a 2D form, sort of like the beginning of Mario 64, but all using the touchscreen. You can kind of squash and stretch it, and there's lots of like little mini games in there. I've got some footage up right now, courtesy of Game Explain, who downloaded the Japanese version of this game here. It looks kind of fun, to be honest. I think if I were a baby, I'd love this. But it's cool to see some new Mario coming to the Switch, regardless of what it is. And then on top of that, there has also been kind of a series of very short stop motion animations that have been coming out. And some of these are really charming. They have kind of like a felt Mario running around and doing lots of fun stuff with really nostalgic music. So if this is it for Mario's 40th anniversary, I'll be a little disappointed. But hopefully this means that this is just the beginning of what's to come for Mario's 40th anniversary celebrations. Had you had a chance to watch either of these, Jordan? See the game or these stop motion animations?
I watched the a little bit of the stop animation, and it's actually just like really nice stop animation. This is the kind of stuff I would actually like to see a full show from. Nintendo Stars Inc. would be very cool.
Good point.
It's like let's do this. Like,
Yeah.
what do we like let's get some more stuff out there. I love to see a company really try to just jam themselves into young children's brains at a very young age, so that they will be lifelong fans. It's I love it. It's branding.
Well, it's interesting seeing them putting out a game for like the iPad generation here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it very much feels like you give this to a baby and they just kind of put their hands on it and move it around and stuff like that. But it's like when I was 3, I was playing Mario World, on the Super Nintendo, so and I think it like really made my motor skills like, pretty good at an early age. So I don't know if this is good or bad for childhood development. I'm no child psychologist. But Alex, you have any thoughts on these, or you got any kids of your own?
No, we don't. And I think it looks, I can definitely see, I've got friends who've got kids. I can definitely see it be really appealing. And I think you could maybe look at it on a slightly sinister light and go, this is like, imprinting on kids.
Right.
So they kind of like recognize, at an early age. But Nintendo's, as far as like brands go, it's quite a wholesome brand. So it's, I think it's obviously a nice thing to do. And from what I've seen, it seems, I think just that responsiveness and the kind of interactivity looks nice. And I'm always a big fan of stop motion, so that's always lovely to see. I really like some of the old Star Fox, the puppets. They had the adverts.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see like a Henson's like Netflix show of that stuff. And I think it just feels as a really nice, like, and then the Yoshi's Woolly game, and they like to play around with texture. I think some of the Pikmin adverts had that aspect. So I think it's nice to see Nintendo lean into some of that things, and it'd be really nice to see them reflect on that stuff in their games as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and you're right about the multi-touch. It does seem like it's a nice showcase of the touchscreen for the Switch. I feel like there's not enough games utilize the touchscreen. A lot of people forget that the Switch has touchscreen functionality with their games, so it's nice to see that come out in any way. We'll go and move on to our last bit of news here before we move on to the main topic, and that is that the rumored Nintendo Direct that we discussed last week, that Switch Force said is coming on September 12th, has now been corroborated by Nate the Hare, which is obviously a YouTuber and podcaster and notable person on Twitter, who is almost always correct on these Nintendo Direct leaks. There's obviously a chance that it could be wrong, but Nate the Hate is now saying that the Direct is most likely coming September 11th or 12th. So that will be this upcoming in the next couple weeks here. So that would be pretty exciting. I think that we are long due for a general Direct. Jordan, I know last week you were kind of poo-pooing on the idea of there being a general Direct this soon. Has this changed your mind at all? Do you think Nate the Hate might finally be wrong about something?
I don't know. It's not that I like don't want it or I'm trying to poo-poo, but I'm just like, it'll just happen when it happens. I'm not going to just like sit around following rumors. I'm just going to wait till it happens.
Come on, Jordan. Content. We're trying to get content out of this.
Well, I'll be gone. I'll be on a
That's
trip
true.
at that time anyway. So, but I think if anything, the 12th, I think they're going to want to avoid the September 11th date. If I had to guess,
why is that?
Could be wrong. The obvious reasons
I know. It's the day we were attacked.
See whether they dip into Metroid stuff. Obviously, Metroid Prime 4 is still meant to be coming this year, so you think at some point they're going to have to, they will be starting to talk about it a little bit more. And with Bonanza now out and dying down a little bit, maybe it's time to start finding out a bit more about that. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I think there are still holes in the schedule, and I think there's a lot just for this year alone. And I think that there's a lot of release dates that we need to see for many of these games that have already been announced. But, it's all the new stuff that I always get really excited for, right? The stuff that no one saw coming. I like knowing when the Directs are coming. I like those leaks. I don't love the leaks that just say everything that's going to be in the Direct, right? So hopefully that kind of remains a little bit of a mystery. No matter how much I torture all my neighbors that work at Retro Games, no one will tell me when the release date is. So I hope to be surprised by that by a pretty soon release. But did you have something else, Jordan?
I feel like it's going to be December. Like it just makes sense because, Pokemon's coming out in October, and then now we have Kirby Air Riders in November. And I think the reason they were so cagey about the Kirby Air Riders and the Metroid Prime release dates is because they could have alternated. They could have flopped. It didn't really matter which one went where. And I think, if the rumors are to be believed about some sort of anomaly in Metroid Prime 4, that they're, December, they're going to, by that time, they'll squash that bug out.
Ironing it out. Yeah.
Yeah, just giving them that little extra polish time. But I do wildcard prediction, Metroid Prime 2 and 3, not remastered, just a port, shadow dropped in the direct. That's my wild.
I'm for it.
Babe Ruth pointing out, because I feel like you gotta get 2 and 3 out before 4 comes out, but maybe not.
Yeah, I don't need a full remake like they did with the original, but if they could just add in gyro controls, like add in the new control, because I'm a slut for gyro controls. I love that shit, especially for first-person games. So that would make me a very, very happy man. But I think with that, we'll go ahead and take a break here and move on to our main topic, which is talking with Alex here from Polygon Treehouse, all about multi-platform releases, Röki, Mythwrecked, and how all that works right after this break. And we are back here with Alex from Polygon Treehouse, award-winning creators of Röki and the recently released Mythwrecked, which both of which are multi-platform games. And we're here to talk to you today, Alex, all about the process of putting out multi-platform releases, especially in the indie space. What you decide to do, what the kind of considerations that go into that, maybe how you develop for multi-platform releases. I'm interested to hear all about that. But before we get into that, maybe if you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of introduction about yourself, maybe a little bit about Polygon Treehouse, some of the games you've worked on and stuff like that.
Sure. We started Polygon Treehouse in 2017. Prior to that, I worked for about 14 years at PlayStation, where I'd worked since leaving university and worked on the Killzone series and a whole load of other PlayStation games. When we went indie, we wanted to focus. Obviously, we'd spent a lot of time working on games where you're shooting people. And so we wanted to, looking around the world, we wanted to make something that kind of released some more nourishing vibes in our indie games. So Röki is a modern-day fairy tale about a young girl, Tuve, who goes into the Scandinavian wilderness to rescue her brother. And Mythwrecked is a modern reinterpretation of Greek mythology, which came out of the COVID lockdown, where you couldn't see your friends, you couldn't go on a holiday, you couldn't say goodbye to loved ones. So we started thinking about an idea where you go on a magical holiday, make some new friends, albeit slightly odd ones, because they're the Greek gods and they've all lost their memories. So, we're just starting work on our third game. But yeah, it's been a wild ride. So we're, I think, about 7 or 8 years in, but really enjoying making indie games with tiny teams and, telling interesting stories.
How big are your teams, if you don't mind me asking, for at least for, let's say, for Mythwrecked?
Yeah, so I'm the only full-time member of Mythwrecked, and I think part of the reasons why our kind of business works is that we can keep our costs quite low. I do UI, animation, character art. I can plug in all the sound effects. So I've got quite a broad skill set. When I started working in the industry, that was PlayStation 2. So I'm an old man. And at that point, people's skill sets were broader. People weren't so specialized. So I started off working in 2002 as a character artist. And at that time, you'd make the characters, skin and rig them, animate them, do the cutscene direction. Whereas, over the years, it became like you're just doing the high-res sculpt on a character, or you're just baking down stuff, or you're just doing the surface textures. So that early grounding of having quite a broad skill set kind of weirdly came full circle when we went indie. So, and obviously, the more I've done, the more I've learned. And so, I really like making that. But obviously, there's stuff that I can't do. So working with composers, sound designers, working out how people generally come on for a couple of days a week, working at different times of the project. But even the largest mobile have like 8 people contributed to a project. But it's nice keeping it. Everyone, you can kind of see everyone's fingerprints on the game, so it's nice. And I really enjoy working with small teams. Having managed and art directed larger teams, it's kind of quite refreshing, I think, for me to be hands-on creating rather than at a distance has been really nice. So I absolutely love it. Some things are painful, some things are stressful, but I still absolutely love it. I do not regret starting our own studio. I think it's been amazing.
Right. And is it an entirely remote process, especially in the kind of post-lockdown era?
Yeah, especially in the post-lockdown era. I mean, we started off when we were in Cambridge, and we were collaborating with some other people, ex-PlayStation people who were around Cambridge. So we would go to like coffee shops and meet up on various days, but usually we'd all work remotely anyway. And obviously, since moving to Scotland, even more so. But that's been good. You know, all the tools are there to be able to communicate with people, and I think. I think you maybe have to be slightly more conscious of it. I used to really, when I worked in a big studio, I used to really like just walking over to someone's desk and talking to someone about something and pointing at things. So I think you have to be a bit wary to, to go the extra mile, in terms of communicating to people what it is you're doing. And so there's a number of ways we do that stuff. And I think, and whether it's having streamlined documentation, so it's really easy to absorb. I mean, one thing we like to do is we actually work with composers really, really early on all our games to try and set a tone, because it's much easier to set a tone with music, so people can kind of get a vibe from the music, and then that helps everyone be on the same page.
Right. So it's kind of one element informing the other as far as the design is going, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you could say one thing and one person could interpret it one way, another person could interpret it another way. And so actually having the music there, it really, it helps those things coalesce. And also having like umbrella X statements where, it is like with Mythwrecked, we're like, okay, it's like a modern Saturday morning cartoon,
right?
Like a Steven Universe. And so having those tonal touching points, I think is really, really important. And making sure people make the time to experience those things that are indicative of the game, and everyone experiences them, gets on the same page. And you'll always have a few bumps along the way, and that's totally fine to be expected. But I think you just have to try and go that extra mile to get everyone on the same page. But it really helps to have those guiding stars to be able to go back to and go, is this what we're doing? Does it fit under modern Saturday morning cartoon? Does it fit under creepy but cute fairy tale?
Sure.
And then you can always use those things as a testing point.
Yeah. I love the look of both of the games. I think Mythwrecked is a beautiful game, and I love how expressive all the characters are. That style is definitely nailed, and I think the character animation is I think some of the best stuff about that game. So definitely hats off there. Really enjoyed the style of that game quite a bit. Maybe we can start talking a little bit about multi-platform, because as I understand it, this is actually just brand new. The day we're recording this, Monday, Mythwrecked finally just came to PlayStation platforms today, correct?
Yeah, just a short while ago. Our publisher actually has been handling the ports, Whitethorn Games over in America. So they've been handling the ports. They've got a great porting team. And so I've been working on our next game, and they've been getting the PlayStation versions right, and they just came out today. So that's really, really nice. So now it's basically on all of them. Steam, Switch, Xbox is on Game Pass at the moment. So if you've got a subscription, you can play it up there. Now PlayStation. So we've Thanos'd it and got them all. So
Well, that answers one of the questions that I definitely had, was kind of like who's actually doing the heavy lifting as far as like porting the games over for multi-platform. So you said you have kind of people that you work with on that.
Yeah, we do. It kind of changes from publisher to publisher. So for Röki, our first game, we did the Switch port ourselves, and then the publisher then did subsequent Xbox and PlayStation 1. So it can be a bit of a hybrid thing. I think what we do though is we set the foundations. So, I mean, part of that is making the decision that the game's going to work with gamepad to start off with. So even before you start thinking about consoles, obviously on Steam, which is where many people sell their games, the decision to go, right, we're going to support controllers is a big one into making sure the game can work on consoles. Just in terms of the button prompts and all that stuff. So generally we always create our games with gamepad and consoles in mind. To make, and what we don't want to do is make sure you don't have to do a special case for consoles or stuff that needs substantial rework. And so that's quite an interesting process, but I think it's much, much easier if you start with thinking about that from day one rather than trying to retrofit stuff. So most of that stuff's been relatively straightforward. I think with Röki, we did start off entertaining two control schemes. One, which would be your more traditional point and click, where you have a cursor and go over here, and you could switch between them and the direct control of the character with the pad or keyboard. But we went let's not do that. Let's not have
Right.
It's like two things to maintain. And I think from a narrative point of view, our games are very storytelling focused. And what we liked was the connection to Tuve, the main character that you had with directly controlling with a stick. It's like I'm pushing the stick and they're moving. So it's like Tuve is me rather than I'm going go over there and then it's one step removed. So I think that's quite a powerful thing. And also from a production point of view, then you're not having to balance two sets of interacting with the game. So so that was kind of made things easier with Mythwrecked. It's like we know we're just going to have one way of interacting with the game and not investigate some of those things. The gamepad and having it being controlled by a gamepad. I think if you start off doing that, it's much easier to then get to see how the game could then be transferred easily to consoles. And a lot of one of the kind of hacks we do is using a mobile phone. So like when we're doing like mock-ups of like menus and all that kind of stuff, I'll generally just message myself the image on my phone and say, can I read it? Can I read the text?
It's a great idea.
Use that as a kind of really quick benchmark. I think it's very easy. I think it happened with one of the Peter Jackson King Kong games where like it was notorious, I think, that basically someone had clearly made it on their monitor like this.
Yeah.
And then you put it on a TV and it's like tiny text.
Yeah.
And so
or on a Switch Lite or something, then you're like, what the fuck does this even say?
Yeah. I think getting a bead on those things really early. So I think a lot of stuff, accessibility as well. Everything is easy when you start early and like getting the foundations in. But the visibility of things is really a good one. But we have the Steam Deck as well, which obviously helps testing those things. Easier.
Just put a build out. It takes no time, right? It's just there, and you've got a handheld version. I love what you're saying there about putting it on your phone. It reminds me of when I was doing a lot of audio design and audio mixing. You've got the three. There's like the headphone test, the shitty laptop speaker test, and the car test, right? And as long as they sound good on all three, then you're good. Did you have something you wanted to ask there, Jordan?
Yeah, I was just kind of like when I was putting together the notes for the show, I was kind of like thinking about like how the ubiquity of controllers in the past like 10 years, where pretty much all controllers are the same amount of like button inputs for the most part, is kind of like helped be able to make more multi-platform games possible. And like you just talking about how like, oh yeah, we went with the gamepad because like one version will play on PC and probably nowhere else, or at least like not as easily anywhere else. So like going from the gamepad from the beginning seems like one of the better ways to make your game more accessible on every platform. Pretty cool. I was kind of more curious. But with that ubiquity, it's like, it's really nice, but like, is there a particular platform? I know you said that the developer or the publisher ends up helping with a lot of the ports, but is there one in particular that's like easier or harder than another to work with or something?
Switch is definitely the hardest platform from a performance point of view. So with what we did, we launched Röki in I think it was like July 2020, and then basically took 3 months to optimize it for Switch.
Right.
The Switch. But that was a really a good learning experience for us. I mean, our games... Was that
in-house? You guys did the Switch?
Yeah, we did
in-house.
that. And so that stood us in really good stead for Mythwrecked. So we had much less, it was much a smoother process with Mythwrecked, and we sim shipped on Switch and Steam and Xbox for Mythwrecked. And so that was really interesting. I mean, our art style is kind of targeted towards lower power systems anyway. So we use flat shaded 3D. So the sizes of our games are really small because we don't have a huge texture budget. Everything remains really crisp, so we have to, you can zoom in as much as you want, and it just everything feels much more readable. You don't have as much noise or have to worry about denoising things, and we don't have any LODs in our games ever. So we've never adjusted polygon counts for different platforms. So everything is the same geometry across everything. So, and I think my head would explode if we didn't do that stuff. So it's part of that self-preservation.
Well, how much of that is just the style that you like to do, and how much of that is like purposefully planning for lower spec hardware?
I think a little bit of dumb luck, a little bit of planning. So I think there's definitely the reason why we chose that art style was from a production point of view. Like we knew coming from a big AAA studio that we were not going to be able to make a game with traditional rendering styles.
Sure.
And so we did some tests where we basically jettisoned key parts of the 3D art pipeline. One was like traditional lighting, and one which is texturing. And so we started looking at what would a 3D game look like with flat colors, where we had to concentrate more on shape and silhouette and motion to make things readable. And and that stood us in good stead for running on lower powered systems as well, from a readability point of view and a performance point of view. But we found, I think, like the world of like performance has changed. So it used to be in like PlayStation 2 times, people would really try and squeeze as much poly count as they could, make things really, really light. And it's just not the kind of the bottleneck anymore. Like throwing a few extra polygons at things is not a problem. It's more in the draw calls and the rendering and the shaders and that side of things. So generally we've found that we don't have to be that precious about polygons. We can be a little bit indulgent and that's fine. And the kind of savings we're getting elsewhere, more than make up for it. So so I think we did like also the thing, when you're a small team, you want to basically be investing your time in the stuff that's going to give you the results. So we could do LODs and stuff, but then you'll maybe get some visual glitches as when they change. But also, like, if it's not, you have to be careful you don't get into this habit of doing things because you think it's going to do something and actually we don't need to do that. Let's just not do it.
Well, when you get into the nitty gritty on that too, I would imagine across the different platforms, especially at different power levels, that's going to perform differently on each platform. And so like cutting that out of the pipeline, I imagine, smooths over a lot of the aches that you would get from porting. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so it's just less stuff to have to balance,
right.
Is always a good thing. And so sharing the same geometry and obviously the resolutions of like, the game outputting at different resolutions will change, but having all being geometry based means that it doesn't, it's always going to be crisp. Whether it's like 4K, whether it's 1080p. So that's kind of, again, has been a nice thing for us. When I think people say that 3D games are harder to get working well on Switch, and I think there's an element of truth to that. We've been also quite careful about camera perspectives, and like we have a curated camera, so we're kind of showing a cinematic view that we control, so we're not having to build all the world that's around you or allow you to spin the camera around too much. But the big one we found for Switch is draw calls, and so that was basically just the amount of times the game has to render stuff. So basically, if there's lots of different separate meshes that make up your scenes, it was absolutely killing things. And so we've basically that whole 3 months, we spent most of the time going through our scenes and merging down meshes. And so we'd have like much less meshes, and that basically gave us a huge performance boost across the board. And so we knew for the next game that was the key critical thing to focus on.
Sounds tedious.
It is, but it was like it was good to and some of it was like we had these big guardians in Röki, and they'd have we'd build them all as like theater flats, so they'd have like little triangles for fur, and we'd animate them all individually and get these nice waving effects. And because it's all unlit, it's like one seamless 3D object. So it's a case of like going through and actually, rather than being all separate meshes that are animating, having to go through and put skeletons in it all, and like so basically they could all animate. So it was a huge amount of work, but I think that pain of that process basically stood us in really good stead. So then for the next game, we could do that from the off. So in Mythwrecked, we have all these, each scene you're in has all these reactive urns that you can kind of run past and wobble, and they're all a single mesh for everything, and everyone's got a single joint in, so they can animate independently of each other with additive animation layers, but it's still a single mesh. So we had much less. We didn't have to do any performance stuff really with Mythwrecked, which was really nice.
Yeah.
So lots of learning process, and that's the kind of thing of like taking those learnings and making sure you using that as a then springboard to go better next time.
I think it's also just like an outlook thing, right? I think that in any kind of creative project, it's like you run into kinks, or all of a sudden you're like, I'm really banging my head against this. But it's like, if you could view like every kind of pothole in the road as like a lesson for the next project that you're not going to have to deal with, then all of a sudden it's just like, if you can kind of psychologically get yourself through that, then it's always going to pay dividends on whatever project you do next, right?
Yeah, I think when stuff goes wrong, try and not like beat ourselves up about it and use it as a learning experience, because it just makes it psychologically less depressing to deal with that stuff. And I think it's just a nice way to be. Like and sometimes those things, like we were talking about distilling the art style earlier, and sometimes those performance things can actually be moments that make the game better as well. So like I think the first time we put Mythwrecked through to run on the Switch, it was running about 2 frames a second, and that was because this sparkle shader we had on the sand that looked really nice,
right?
But just the Switch wasn't coping with it that well at all. But actually, what that led us to do is like, okay, we still want that effect, but we basically started using geometry particles. So we had like a geometry emitter that was the shape of the sand, and then we'd basically have these little diamond particles that were geometry, so there was no transparency. And basically, it linked up really well with the flat shaded art style. So some of those things it tied in better with the art style. It looked more consistent, and so in tackling some of those problems, it can make things feel better and be better. So, and that took us down a path of doing geometry particles for the entire game. So all the kind of dust poofs as you're running around, all the splashes from the waterfall, everything is geometry, and that's definitely something we're going to be taking forward. So
that's cool.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes tackling these problems can bear great style fruits as well. It's something that made the game stronger.
No, I love that. We often talk on this show and just in general about how restrictions can lead to incredible creativity, and I think that it's like when you have the kind of open, everything is, I can make whatever I want. I've got the most powerful hardware ever, then it's kind of like, oh, I've got too much choice, right? But then when you're kind of constrained, it's like, oh, now I can find these little hacks that are really increasing the value of the product, just overall, even on the higher performing hardware. I think that's really fascinating. So I'd like to maybe talk a little bit more about your publisher. How much of the kind of what platforms you release on and when that happens is dictated by you guys in studio, and how much of that is like your publisher's like, hey, we really want to hit these platforms, and how much do they? I mean, obviously, you said that they found a porting studio for you. Is that correct? With Mythwrecked?
No, so it's they have their own in-house porting studio.
Oh, okay, got it.
So we were working with CJ, who's the engineer at Whitethorn, and he's been great. So basically, from our side, we make sure the game is viable on those platforms, and then we leave it up to the publisher as to what they want to do in what order. I think in terms of me making games, obviously I've got plenty of stuff to do, so I'm happy to like bow to other people's wisdom, and they know what they want to do and what works best for them. So I'm happy for those particular decisions to be taken off my plate. Obviously, we just make sure that the game will run on Switch, Steam Deck, as our kind of benchmark, and then what happens from there. So and I think that probably works differently from publisher to publisher, like in terms of what order what happens. I know like with Röki we did it was Steam, and then it was Switch a few months later, and then the other ones that followed afterwards. So that can be variable. I know there's like perceived wisdom, or there was perceived wisdom about what is better from a marketing point of view, whether it's better to have everything launching at once, or whether it's better to spread things out. And I think those things change, and also like sim shipping on everything, all the platforms at once is a awful lot of work, especially if we were self-publishing, that would be Herculean. So there's those factors as well. I mean, there's also, I know some people like to do the Steam launch, and then maybe they can iron out any kinks that come up, and then they go to platforms, and then they're just kind of then focusing on any teething issues with those platforms rather than the initial thing. So I think there's pros and cons either way, really. And I think it's there's no everything. There's no real right way of doing it. Everything has its pluses and minuses. But the porting process with Whitethorn's been really straightforward. We basically had meetings with them, give the engineers access to our like repositories. That tells what they need, what they we document some stuff for them. But it's been, like I say, we've invested the time into making sure the foundations are good, and so that hopefully it's been not that painful. And I think they were very pleased with, when you're making something and you're there, you kind of think, oh, we're really unprofessional, everything's a bit of a mess, and we're kind of muddling through. And they were like, wow, this is so organized. And so it's kind of nice to have that perspective. And we had quite a very smooth platform submission, all the various checks. I mean, that's the one of the main big things about launching on console versus Steam is all the extra checks and platform submissions you have to go through there.
Right.
They are, they're the biggie. Yeah.
Well, having that kind of handled by somebody else, I'm sure is a huge weight off your shoulders, especially when it comes to certification and all that kind of stuff. Getting that ready, especially when you're just trying. Because I imagine doing cert for 4 platforms at once, especially when you're doing all the ports yourself and you're self-publishing. Like, I can't even imagine. We've talked to developers that do the self-publishing route, and it's like, I mean, it seems like you're shedding no tears working with publishers. It seems like, because I know some people like to have the control themselves, right? And, it's in the film world too. It's like some people like self-release and all that kind of stuff, but I can't, I know me personally, my mind just is not built for that, right?
Yeah, I think it comes down to what you want to focus your time on, and whether you want to be focusing on like making new games or whether you want to be focusing on those things. And I think we probably will be self-publishing our next game, mainly due to, obviously we've worked with publishers a couple of times, had good experiences, mainly due to like some family circumstances of like some some illnesses in our family, and so I don't really want to kind of restrict myself to, and our publishers have actually been great about those situations, but kind of like, we've done it a couple of times now, maybe want a bit more flexibility or be able to step away,
like deadlines and whatnot and deliverables.
Yeah, exactly. So we've had a really good experience. This is working with publishers, but okay, now maybe we've got the experience, but I'll still be maybe working with someone else to handle those ports. I think I'm the person who wants to animate the characters, make them do funny facial expressions and come up with interesting stories. And so that's kind of where I want to put my energy. So then it's like, okay, finding the people who can assist you with those things. But like I say, those processes don't have to be that painful if you lay the foundations. I think if you don't give them consideration and go, oh, let's try and cram this game onto a Switch. Oh, it runs like a brick in treacle. Then it's kind of can be difficult to go back, to make that work from scratch, and rather than you might end up having to rework other games. So I think getting those early citers, getting it running on dev kits early is a really definitely something I would recommend. Take the pain out of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in that consideration, I know you had mentioned that you were focusing usually on like Steam Deck and Switch, and go from there. What kind of like success do you see on those platforms, or do you focus on those platforms because that's where they're the most successful, or is it more of like if it runs on Steam Deck and it runs on Switch, it will run on everything else?
Yeah, definitely if it runs on those, then it will run on everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we haven't tried. I think because the nature of our control schemes, we haven't tried doing anything on mobile. It's not something that really interests me that much. But yeah, it's basically if we know we can run on Switch, it'll run on everything. Everything else will be really straightforward. Also, the platforms, Nintendo were very supportive of Röki, and we were featured in Nintendo Indie World.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to experience that from the other side of being like, I really hope our trailer's in this one. I'm expecting it to be in this one, but you never really know until you actually see it come up on the stream. So yeah, I think we did really well with on the Switch with our games. I think partially due to the style and the kind of welcoming nature of the games. It feels quite Nintendo. So but yeah, we know that if we can, if it's going to be readable on Switch and it's going to run well on Switch, it'll run well on everything. So I think if you can target that as the benchmark, then from there it's all golden.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know obviously you were talking about how Mythwrecked is currently on Game Pass.
Yes.
I'm sure that when talking about Jordan's question here about kind of like the success on different platforms, I'm sure you measure the success differently from platform to platform as well, especially if you're on something like Game Pass. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the idea of going to Game Pass? Is that something that was, an idea that you guys had at your studio? Is that something from the publisher? And how do those kind of conversations start? For whatever you can say, obviously, I'm sure some of that's a little NDA'd.
Yeah, well, it was our publisher who sorted that out. So they're basically, we were making our game and leaving the kind of those like deals and stuff up to the publisher. But yeah, it's a bit of a no-brainer for us. If you can get on it, then it's a wonderful opportunity, to have I think when the game debuted on Game Pass, I think it was like March time, it's like a massive influx of people playing the game.
Right.
So you almost can't comprehend. And so that has been, been really good. And I think some people may say, okay, well, if it's on Game Pass, does it damage the sales on other platforms? It's like, well, maybe. But I think generally, people play on what they want to play on, and sometimes there might not be that overlap. So I think it would have been, definitely too good an opportunity there wasn't any idea of turning down the opportunity. So I'm really, really grateful to do it. It was a really, really great opportunity. But yeah, it's a very different thing. I think we were on, some humble bundles with Röki, and I think with Röki we're I don't know, maybe still on PlayStation Plus Extra. And so if people have that PlayStation Plus Extra, they can play Röki as part of the subscription as well. And it becomes slightly less harder to kind of quantify. I mean, I'm not like a super business brain, so I don't tend to like go digging through like loads and loads of data. I think the stuff's ticking around in the background is fine for me, and I'll focus on things. But yeah, they're both those things. I think for indie developers, they can be really significant being on those things in terms of getting the game in front of more people and enjoying it. And that's what we're trying to do, right? Get people to enjoy our games. So I think there's
totally. And it's like, I'm
really
sure the
opportunities.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I imagine the kind of upfront, it's a different kind of revenue model as well, and so it's like, especially for indie developers where, say, you do have a bit more of a niche game where you're on a platform like Xbox where the player base is not necessarily going to be looking, it's not the same kind of player base that you would find on like Switch, right? Where that's very much an indie machine. You have a lot more, casual or non-violent games, maybe, having that kind of guaranteed amount of sales, like at the beginning, or guaranteed, getting the bag early, so to speak, has got to be helpful when making the consideration to go to that platform, I would imagine.
Yeah. I think it's like a bit of a no-brainer, really. Like I think it's I think for games of our scale, it's if you have the opportunity, I think it's definitely something to do, and just getting people to enjoy the game and chance to experience maybe something a little bit different. So I think it's definitely a different thing. And they're kind of like slightly hard to comprehend in some ways. It kind of feels like it, used to, okay, we're doing this, we're selling this many copies, we're seeing it come in. So it's like a slightly different way of thinking. It takes a bit of getting around, but like I say,
future
it's
math.
been,
Yeah.
Totally.
Well,
but no.
And then I think also, like people who do on Game Pass, like don't necessarily, they just want to try a game out. They're not necessarily like playing the game to completion versus probably more of a completion rate on other platforms. But like, I think what's also really cool about Game Pass for me personally, I use it as like, one, to just play AAA games that I know I'm only going to play one time and never again. And so instead of spending $70, $60, $70, whatever, just play through there. But also it's like, for me, I'll try like a game and then I'm like, oh, okay, this is a game I'd be interested in. And then I'll go to Switch and I'll just buy it on Switch so I can play it like wherever I want to go.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a marketing tool in a way. I don't know how common that is, but I mean, that's definitely something I do.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a visibility aspect of being on a big thing like that, and people more aware of the game, and word of mouth. People will tell people about the game if they enjoyed it. So I think there's definitely side effects from it, undoubtedly. So yeah, it's been been really interesting experience. It's definitely something I'd do again. I think it's been really great just to have the games market's quite crowded as well. It's everyone's fighting for visibility on Steam and various other places.
More than ever
to have that visibility boost. Like it's really, really good. So very grateful to Xbox and Game Pass. It's been awesome.
Yeah, I I know you guys just released on PlayStation. I don't know if you can answer this, but was that due in part to any sort of exclusivity agreements? Like, do you ever find that when you're going multi-platform? Like, are there considerations going to a subscription service where you have to stay on this for a while before moving over to this platform?
I don't know the specifics of that stuff in this case. I know maybe sometimes there are, but I don't think that was the case. First, I think it was just a case of like the it took a while to getting around to the PlayStation version. They want to make sure it took advantage of some of the PlayStation features.
Sure.
So it's so I think that was just not I think it can be the case sometimes, but I'm not entirely sure whether that was. Whereas, like I say, generally one of the nice things I think a publisher is I'm just going to focus on making the game, and then I'll let people and I think sometimes with those things, like I think with any kind of collaboration, it's kind of nice to go like, better than me. Like, you take care of that. Take it off my hands. And but it's nice. It's nice to. I know that people were definitely asking about when's it coming to PlayStation. So it's nice that people can enjoy it there now. So it's taken a little while, but it's I think it's really nice to have it finally on all those on all the people can enjoy it on all the platforms. So but like from my perspective, Whitethorn, our publisher, and CJ have done a really great job of taking care of all that stuff. I think one of the interesting things we touched about the platform submission stuff a little bit earlier. I think there's some kind of interesting ones there in terms of like language and what language is used for like a button or like the control stuff. There's some like quite specific platform language. And so there's that. Obviously, there are things you kind of learn about over time. So I think also for other people looking at doing the foundations early, like getting an eye on some of those things and working out maybe what some of the how you have to refer to this, how you have to refer to that. Yeah, it can be quite interesting things. So I know that there's certain features that may be like trademarked based on different platforms, or maybe like other platforms are aware of it. So I think it's good to make sure your terminology is. You have the flexibility to call this something else on that, and maybe stuff's not baked into a big long line of text. And if someone might want to call it the gamepad, someone might want to call it a controller, someone might call it a dual sense, someone might, it's Joy-Cons. So I think you need to have the flexibility for doing multi-platform stuff to be able to call things whatever the platform requires, really. So
I love the something that Nintendo started and I've seen picked up in the Steam Deck, and I hope to see just kind of console wide is this sort of just button glyph image, having the sort of diamond and then the button that you need to press highlighted or whatever, right? And then that way you don't have to put X or A or B or whatever it is. It's just kind of the button here in the diamond. That's the one you need to press, right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And I think it's kind of, I think as long as you're consistent, and I think you start off with those things, I think that's kind of good. I think maybe some of the button click ones, like they're kind of, how do you convey those things? But generally we do show glyphs for everything, and then obviously we have like some remapping stuff as well. So it's it can be a bit challenging. I think maybe for like some of our level games, we kind of actually really like to show you the exact button you have to press.
Right.
And just but I mean, some people, I think it's quite smart when people look at their games, especially for narrative games. Maybe they don't need that complicated. It could be a single button input, right? And then it's like, well, you could just press any button. So it's depending on how complex the control scheme is, and there's lots of different ways of doing it. And sometimes it's quite nice, and a game has really minimal UI, right? And it's just like it can be any button. It's just got because if your finger on a button, you can press anything. So there's definitely lots of different ways of doing that stuff. I think for ours, we tend to have a reasonably. I mean, you're running around, you're talking to people. So, but we have like a sprint button, and we have like you can open up the Ambrosia Dex device or the journal in Röki. Says we like to use different buttons for different things, and obviously when you're in the menus, we use the shoulder buttons and the triggers for tabbing and that kind of thing. Right. So generally we like to communicate some of those things, and I think you can have more abstracted things, but I think we always try and make sure that everyone can be catered to, and so I'd like clarity of actually showing the buttons. This personal preference, I just quite like doing that. So
I think we should probably move a little bit towards wrapping up here. There's a few other things I don't know that we'll be able to get to everything in the notes here. This has been such a fascinating conversation, but I know it does kind of feel like we're moving a bit towards like a bit more of like a unified platform, and I think we're seeing lots of even first party exclusives from PlayStation and Xbox showing up on the other platforms. We're also moving towards this this world in which all of these consoles are really just big powerful PCs at this point, right? And not only that, we're seeing the increase of streaming, which I'm sure a lot of people are streaming Mythwrecked, through Game Pass on built into their Samsung TVs and whatever now. So I would imagine too, as you're the multi-platform process will probably be even further streamlined over the coming years. But that's kind of just, I wanted to work in my own thoughts into that. So apologies if I'm being a little soapboxy about that. That might have to be held for another episode. But potentially, I'd like to talk a little bit about just sort of the Switch 2 at the moment, because I know right now Mythwrecked and Röki have Switch 1 versions that are on the eShop, but no bespoke Switch 2 versions. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even something I've even looked at. Like, we've been focusing on getting the starting on our next game. So I think people have been playing the game on Switch 2s, and it's been working well. I probably should give it a go. Again, see like how it all works and whether there's like a frame rate boost. But like I was saying, seeing as they work really well on Switch, I'm assuming they're going to work even better. Maybe have like some frame rate boost possibly. So
right, especially if it's like an unlocked frame rate for the beginning.
Yeah, and I think for us, if we were to do like a bespoke Switch 2 version, like I say, the geometry is not going to change, textures aren't going to change due to the art style. So it's like I'm not entirely sure what we personally would do for that.
Yeah, like resolution boost, something like that.
Yeah, and that stuff may happen automatically. So it's so it's and it's not really in terms of, I think when I have not looked into getting hold of a dev kit. Again, it's kind of like further down the line for us. One of the exciting prospects, and it'll be really interesting to see where this happens with Nintendo Switch 2. Obviously, our games are kind of modern adventure games. It'll be really interesting. We have the kind of proxy mouse on the Switch 2.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be really fascinating to see whether, because there's a big potential that Switch 2 could become the new home for adventure games, right? Point and click. That stuff, it'd be really interesting to see. Like, it doesn't really feel like that is in terms of traditional Nintendo audience and people playing those games, it doesn't really feel as a huge Venn diagram of that stuff. But who knows? Like those kind of things, it takes us one game to have a big success on the system using the mouse controller, and then many more will follow. So I think that does open up a lot of opportunities. It does feel like a slightly tension there, just like if that feels like a very PC thing, right? Having a mouse. And Nintendo is very much like a console. So I think there's an interesting thing there. But I'm fascinated to try Metroid out with that and see how that feels. Does it still feel like a Nintendo game? Does it feel like I'm playing on PC? Hey, who knows? It's going to be really, really interesting. But I do find that area kind of fascinating, like new developments, how things and markets may open up. So
I imagine you guys have dev kits for some of these other consoles in house. Like did you guys got a Switch 1 dev kit at the studio? And I know there's been a lot of talk about the Nintendo's been a little stingy with Switch 2 dev kits this generation so far. I think some of those are rolling out pretty soon, but crossing my fingers so you guys get one soon, because it is nice to have a dev kit for the console you're trying to make for, right?
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. I'm sure once we kind of get to that point of looking at laying the foundations, we'll probably try and get a hold of one. But it's we found the process for the Switch 1 dev kits. I mean, we're probably I think it's always going to be difficult to get hold of those things early on in development, and then things will tend to open up a little bit. So
when did you guys get one, if I can ask? For
trying to think. Yeah, it's maybe like a couple of years into making the game, so I'm guessing it might be like 2019. I don't think it was like. I think maybe it might have been a bit later. I think maybe we got them in advance, and then they kind of sat there for a little while until we were ready to get going with them. Right. So, I think, like I say, it may be that I have to hear, maybe there are other places and the people who are helping on the porting side of things. But
like I know, for instance, what was it? The new High on Life. That's what the game is called, right? With the shooter with the gun that talks. Just got a Switch 2 version, and everybody was like, "Wow, they really put that out like within a week or something like that." Because the original developers were like, "Please send us a dev kit." but then I think it was that people actually saw that it was a porting house, right? It was the same people that put out the Split Fiction port for Switch 2 did the High on Life port, and so it's like so I do think they are being strategic with it, but it's like if you've got people that are doing your ports for you, I would imagine that they're probably going to be prioritized for getting a lot of those studios that do ports specifically. It would make sense for them to get them released.
And that does make sense, and I think I mean in terms of like indies for Nintendo Switch 2, it's going to be interesting to see about the store and visibility and how. Yeah, I think everyone, it's not outrageous claim to say that the eShop got a bit chuggy on Switch 1. So I think so looking at how that can be streamlined and discoverability, I think that's a big thing for all games, but especially for indies, being able to find them and Nintendo highlighting certain games or like featuring them in the same way that Steam does with festivals. Yeah, the indie worlds are really great, for showcasing indie games. So those opportunities are really, really awesome for, the same way with Game Pass, then the indie worlds, there's lots of really great way of like showcasing indie games. So I think generally I feel that platforms do a lot for indie games and helping then showcase them off. It's just very competitive to get those opportunities.
That's certainly an unprecedented time for indies, and like you said, there's so much. We've got a deluge every day of new games coming out, but I think it's great that you guys have been able to find ways in order to break through the noise. And I think it seems like every platform has its pros and cons when it comes to that sort of thing. And I'm really glad to see you guys having some success with these games because you really do make awesome games. So
thank you very much.
Of course. Well, I think with that, unless there's anything else you had, Jordan, I think we should probably wrap it up. It's been a wonderful conversation. And listener, if you have anything to add on the state of multi-platform releases or anything about that, please let us know in the comments or on our Discord. And with that, Alex, I think we're going to take a small break here and we're going to move on to our last section of the show, which is the games that we've been playing recently. So I have not been playing a ton new this week. I have been playing, like we talked about a little bit earlier, Kirby and the Forgotten Land and the Star-Crossed World DLC. I'm having a ton of fun with it. It's a lot of fun. I think just the new levels are quite a bit more challenging than the base game, which is great. Because as much as I love that game, it is a very easy game. And if I'm playing it through again, it's nice to have a little bit of challenge this go around. Lots of collectibles to find. I'm really enjoying that. And then really the only other game that I've been playing, other than, here and there, I've been dipping into a few, but I have been getting back into Control. I'm trying to beat that game. We talked about this a little bit last week, Jordan. But I did pick up on sale recently Alan Wake 2. I finally picked that up for the PS5 and also a couple other PlayStation games. These are the first games I've actually bought since I got my PS5. I've been mostly playing on my Switch and Steam Deck, but I'm going back into Control, kind of relearning the movement tech and all that kind of stuff, so I can actually finish the game and kind of go forward more into the Remedy verse of games, because I really do think that they do some really amazing stuff, especially narratively with their games. So I've been having a lot of fun playing that. And I think that's mostly what I'll say. I bought a new game recently on my Steam Deck, but I'll probably wait until next week to talk about that, as Nightling looked really cool, by the way. But hopefully I'll be have more to say about that next week. But what about you, Jordan? You been playing anything cool?
Yeah, so this past weekend was the Sonic Racing Cross Worlds Open Network test. So I was pretty curious to just like try this game, in a year where we're literally getting Mario Kart World, Kirby Air Riders, and Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. I'm like, okay, I just got to know. Oh, there's also like a Garfield Racing.
Yeah, I was going to say, what about Garfield Kart?
Yeah, my bad, sorry. But so I played it a bit over the weekend, and honestly, I was not that impressed.
Oh, really?
The racing's okay. It's just different than I'm used to, but like for some reason, maybe my eyes, but some reason like the frame rate kind of chugged a little bit in a way that didn't feel very fluid in a game that like the racing needs to feel fluid, and compared to like, especially like something like Mario Kart World, which feels so buttery smooth that like jumping into this, it felt jarring in a way that was not great. I do like all the characters. And then also like Mario Kart World also, I have to keep comparing it, but kind of ruined me because like the in-betweens in the online where you're just racing around, like driving around in the world, is beautiful. It's so perfect. It's such a good way to just like, instead of, oh, I'm going to sit and look at my phone for a minute. Oh, my race is starting. I got to like really hop back in. You know? Like it keeps me more focused on the game itself. And this Cross Worlds has a very like, I guess modern kind of almost like Fortnite lobby-esque, like when you're partying up with your friends and then you wait and then suddenly you're in a race. And I don't know, something about that didn't gel with me, but I do like, and something that Mario Kart should absolutely have stolen is customization of your carts. Not just like, you know, tires, the front, the back, which they do have. Decals, dude, like all these stickers that are in Mario Kart World that you just have a sticker is so lame. And in this one, you can like put all these decals on your car and kind of customize your car in that way. Kart. And then also like your name in the thing too. You can kind of customize that banner, as is tradition in pretty much every modern online game. So let's go.
Nintendo,
anyway,
we got to give them a decade to get up to speed with everybody else in the industry. Yeah.
But so I honestly, with as many games are coming out, I probably won't be picking this up. So I'm kind of glad I played the network test. Other than that, I bought UFO 50 whenever it first came to the Switch. I think probably day one, because I was like, I want to support this. Haven't been dipping my toes too far in, but I have probably played about 13 or 14 different games now, to varying degrees of love or kind of hate, because I'm not a huge fan of 8-bit games, NES games. My NES game days are way behind me, and I'm glad. So revisiting some of that is a little...
which ones have you been enjoying?
I really like Night Manor. I finished Night Manor on Saturday. I played it all the way through. But when you were talking about like adventure games and using a mouse, I was like, oh, that would have been a perfect game for mouse mode on the Switch. But it's like, it's a Switch 1 game, not a Switch 2 game. So it doesn't have any mouse mode support.
You can't use it on PC either. I think in that game, they really wanted to emulate the idea of like using that 2-button gamepad, you know what I mean? So I think it is a little hampered by the technology of the 80s, right?
And I'm having varying degrees of fun with that idea as a UFO 50. But anyway, I like that one. And then I actually really like Rock On, the like tower defense style game.
Right.
It's kind of tough, especially once you start you have to like kind of get into the economy of like farming chickens. But this sounds insane. A caveman and chickens. But I actually been really enjoying that one as well. I could go on, so I'm just gonna stop.
Sure.
But yeah, Nightmare is like my first cherry for UFO 50.
Amazing game. There's a bunch of games in that collection that they could have just sold for $10 or $15 by themselves, and it would have been worth it. So a $25 package for that game is absurd. I love that game so much. But what about you, Alex? Have you been playing anything cool recently?
Yes, I've been playing The Drifter, so on the Steam Deck. So this is like a modern point-and-click game, really cool pixel art. You're kind of a drifter hobo. It's like a kind of almost like John Carpentry, horror-ish kind of feel. And you're kind of going around, people are disappearing from the streets. It's like conspiracy. It has like some quite nice kind of time loop sequences where you're kind of caught and you have to work out a way of doing things. So you're playing different bits over and over again. So it's got really great voice acting. I kind of on reasonably friendly terms with the developer. So I've been like been making the time to play through it. And it's a really really wonderful game. I know they've been working really hard on it for a while, and it's really it's really feels like a really rich place to be. So I've been really enjoying that, and also it feels like just dip in and play out a little bit. Works. I quite like with puzzle games. Sometimes you can play it and then you have a bit of time away or go for a walk or something, and then suddenly you'll think of the solution to something and you go back to it.
Yes, absolutely.
The game continues even when the console's off. So it's been great. So I definitely recommend having a look out for that one, The Drifter. Yeah,
I love the I'm looking at the trailer right now. The pixel art style is really beautiful on that. Some amazing animations. If you want to get me on your side with a pixel art game, all you got to do is add rim light. If you add rim light to your pixel art characters, we'll be buying your game. So I was a big fan of that. But awesome. Well, I think that's going to do it then for today's episode. Alex, thank you so much for joining on today's episode.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was such a wonderful conversation. I really feel like I learned a lot. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to give a thanks to MilkyWay.co for doing our website. Thanks to Corduroy for the music. Thanks to all of our patrons on Patreon. And if you'd like to find me online, I'm pretty much ever on the internet at Monolith Fiji.
You can find me at Bordan.
And what about you, Alex? Where can people find you online?
So I'm on Blue Sky as Kanaritron. Also, you can check out Polygon-Treehouse.com if you want to check out any of our games, stuff like that. But yeah.
Very good. Yeah, definitely. Alex is a great Blue Sky follow. Your posting is as good as your development. You're a great poster, Alex. Thank you very much for coming on there. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I love to see it. So definitely worth a follow over there. And yeah, definitely check out Polygon Treehouse as well. If you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Blue Sky and Twitter, at Super Switch Headz on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We have a website, switchheadz.com. And we have a Discord, as we have discussed, a Patreon, and a Facebook group. We'll have links to all three of those in the description of this episode. Whether you're watching it on YouTube or you're listening to it on Apple or Spotify, definitely please leave us a like and a subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a review on Apple and Spotify. And join us over there on the Discord. We'd love to have you. It's such a wonderful community of like-minded folks out there, a very non-toxic video game community on the internet, which you love to see. And a great place to discuss the show and many, many other things as well. But I think that's going to do it, gang. We're going to have a great episode for you guys next week, so make sure you don't touch that dial. But in the meantime, you guys know the drill. Be safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Play Mythwrecked. Play Röki. Excellent games all around. They're on every single platform known to man. We love you guys very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.